Aloha, my name is Kimo Nichols. Welcome to my LIS 672 presentation on library technology, past, present, and future. My presentation today will focus on the past library technology of the card catalog, the present library technology of makerspaces, and the future library technology of virtual and augmented reality. I just wanted to start us off with a quote that I like from the author Alex Wright from his book Cataloging the World, Paul Otlet and the Birth of the Information Age. The quote goes, "Today we might tend to think of the card catalog as a simplistic information retrieval tool, the dominion of somber librarians in a fusty reading room. However, to take such a dismissive view of these compact, efficient systems, the direct ancestors of the modern database, may lead us to overlook the critical role they played in the industrial information explosion that would reshape the European world in the 19th century." I just wanted to give a quick historical overview, which begins in 1450 in Germany with the invention of Gutenberg's printing press. And this monumental invention, in combination with the beginning of the Renaissance at roughly the same time, saw a huge rise in published material. And this eventually led, if you look at these subsequent dates, to attempts at early bibliographies and in organizing all this new library material. I want to jump down for time's sake to the bottom of the page to the US, the mid-19th century, where Assistant Harvard librarian Ezra Abbott helped to perfect, not invent, he didn't actually invent it, but he helped perfect the modern alphabetized library card catalog, and this included the grouping of minor topics under more general headings. And then in 1876, not too long after, some famous library names, Thomas Dewey and Charles Cutter, really took up the mantle of both the Dewey Decimal System and the accompanying card catalog systems for use in U.S. libraries, primarily as a means of standardization. Dewey was a big believer in this, and he subsequently formed the Library Bureau, a private company who eventually sold library supplies like standardized library cards that catered to the new library system. In his book Paper Machines, Marcus Krajewski considers these new card systems the early precursors of the computerized database because of the way they atomized data into manipulatable units and allowed the reordering of the data for different purposes. Dewey's insistence on standardization combined with new inventions like the typewriter brought greater uniformity to the card catalog than even the neatest quote-unquote library hand could, and undoubtedly increased the amount of information that one could squeeze into the approximate 3x5 surface. When the Library of Congress developed printed card sets using the ALA standard size and offered them for sale starting in 1902, the use of the card catalog in U.S. libraries was pretty much solidified. And just to sum up, some of the advantages of this new system: again, it allowed for improved effective standardization, and it allowed for organization by author, title, subject, or call number, and also cross-referencing. You see at the bottom here this new notion of see also. If you saw that on a card, you could also see different parts of the card catalog for cross-referencing purposes. Also, as far as physical advantages, the cards allowed for easy removal and refiling, and they were also, as mentioned, much more easily edited. For the sake of time, we're going to skip ahead about 70 years to 1968 and the invention of the MARC record. This allowed bibliographic records to be more easily read by computers. And eventually, skipping ahead about 20 years, this led in the 1980s to pretty much the beginning of the end of the card catalog once the first OPACs went online in universities. Some of the basic OPAC advantages over card catalogs: OPACs allow for immediate editing of bibliographic information. OPACs do not take up physical space. Accessing OPACs does not require the patron's physical presence. The option of displaying full, medium, or brief versions of bibliographic records is possible, and the speed of OPACs cannot be underestimated. They allow for much more rapid searching than flipping through a card catalog did. The second section of my presentation on current technologies has to do with library makerspaces. The rise of hackerspaces or makerspaces as a concept outside of the computer tech world began around 2005 with the beginning of Make magazine and its promotion of creative projects and methods for making. Due to their increasing digitized nature, public, academic, and school libraries in both Europe and North America have been integrating the hackerspace concept to fit a growing niche in libraries for roughly the last 10 to 15 years. Thus, libraries were some of the earliest adopters of hackerspaces. These new library spaces were deemed makerspaces and were similarly designed to facilitate collaborative experimentation. I wanted to move on to some actual examples of makerspaces and some sample makerspace activities for school and public libraries. And the important thing to note about these makerspaces is most experts advise to start small. The main thing is that kids participate in some sort of tactile activity, which helps their imaginations and their learning abilities. So things as simple as creating a coloring area or a table or wall of building blocks may seem insignificant, but these are actually examples of makerspace technology. It's simple technology. Nonetheless, they are perfectly legitimate. Sticking with makerspaces in school and public libraries, some of the educational advantages are changes passive learning into active hands-on learning. And this type of learning really reaches those young adults who learn in a non-linear fashion. Those who are hands-on learners, learning by doing rather than seeing or listening to instruction from their teacher, and those who learn best by collaborating with others. This type of makerspace really speaks to those kids. And don't underestimate fun. This brings back the fun of creativity to both preteens and teens, and transforms a learning space again into a very active learning space. Moving on to makerspaces in academic libraries, there are obviously a big difference just given the age of the individuals involved. According to a 2015 study by Burke, there are stronger showings for more digital high-tech makerspace activities, not surprisingly, in universities as compared to public or school libraries, just given the level of difficulty involved. So popular school and public library makerspace activities like arts and crafts and hand tool collections generally are not represented in academic libraries. Academic library makerspaces are definitely more devoted to tech. Continuing on with makerspaces in academic libraries, I've just listed a few things on this slide as benefiting college students who participate and are actively involved in makerspaces. These areas can be a venue for learning specific types of skills relevant to fields of study in higher education. They can be practical laboratories to learn concepts related to STEM. They can be designed as venues with equipment aimed at prototyping architectural or engineering designs, enable students in biomedical engineering or other scientific fields to create items to use in simulating body functions or treating medical conditions. And they're also popular with business schools. Of course, with success comes growing criticism, and there are some criticisms of makerspaces. And actually, one of the reasons why I chose this as my current technology study was that these criticisms actually do interest me, and I'm not, although I do see the obvious benefits of makerspaces, I do understand these criticisms as well. One of them is the belief that the makerspace movement has a gender and racial equity issue. And you'll see here that I put down, according to Drexel University's 2019 study of 30 established K-12 makerspaces across the country, makerspace leaders are disproportionate. Of course, with success comes criticism, and I wanted to just get into a few of those quickly. The chief criticism, I believe, of makerspaces is that there are gender and racial equity issues. A 2019 study by Drexel University of 30 established kindergarten through 12 makerspaces across the country found that leaders of these areas are disproportionately men. And Make magazine itself usually features a white male on the cover. Also, the question of who do library makerspaces serve? Libraries try to serve as many different people as possible, and by adding a makerspace, maybe you don't serve read aloud programs as well. So if you adopt a makerspace, people sometimes get worried that you're going to give up serving other communities. Also, as far as library budgets go, if your library budget is already thin, then adding a makerspace and possibly expensive technology just cuts into that budget. So you do have to weigh that before deciding to establish a makerspace in your library. And lastly, there's kind of a more of a philosophical debate as to whether makerspaces champion kind of a traditional conservative capitalist view of the world and of makers themselves as being special and better than everybody else. So that is an interesting criticism that I have read a bit about and will be including in my paper. Lastly, for my future technology, I'm going to cover virtual and augmented reality. I just wanted to start with a couple of quick definitions. Virtual reality is a completely submersive sensory experience where VR headsets completely take over your vision to give you the impression that you're somewhere else. So visually, you're taken to wherever the headsets want you to go. They're opaque, and because of this, the outside world is replaced with a virtual one. Augmented reality is slightly different. The headsets do not completely take over your field of vision like they do in VR. The images are placed on top of your screen, much like they are, the great example is Pokemon Go. So Microsoft HoloLens glasses and other smart glasses with AR technology do not replace the user's field of vision like VR headsets do. As to the origins of this technology, virtual reality is actually not a new technology or concept, as there have been simple examples since the 19th century, including panoramic mural paintings and developments like the popular ViewMaster stereoscope that I actually had as a kid. In 1939, inventor Morton Heilig's Sensorama movie theater technology featured things like stereo speakers, a stereoscopic 3D display, fans, smell generators, and a vibrating chair, all designed to stimulate all of the viewer's senses, much like virtual reality technology today. And finally, Helig developed the Telesphere mask, patented in 1960, and this was the first example of a head-mounted display, or HMD. Creation of the term augmented reality was claimed by Thomas Caudell, who was a researcher for Boeing, and he developed a see-through head-mounted display, again an HMD, that guided workers on accurate wire placements as they built aircraft. Later, this technology was developed for military training and also space industry simulation flights by NASA. There are some current trends that I wanted to discuss. The first being that, impressively, just under half of academic research library member institutions now offer access to VR and or AR technology in some way. Neither the size of a university's library student population nor the size of its budget plays significantly into whether or not a university has this technology, which suggests that cost is not a limiting factor for adoption. In their current state, these technology services seem to be geared primarily toward demonstrating the technology, providing students and faculty members with a chance to test it out rather than directly tying it in with curriculum or encouraging software development. So at the moment, for the time being, it seems mostly kind of a trial just to test out the new toys. While the availability of technology was made clear on the library websites, there were overall few details about the type of support or training that the library provided. These websites also did not make clear how the technology is being used or is expected to be used by students and faculty members. I have a few examples of VR and AR technology currently at work in academic libraries. I'm not going to get into all of them. Most of them all involve the lending of VR, AR technology, and also providing host spaces for experiences and games. I did want to just mention one that I thought was really cool, and that's the top one at the University of Oklahoma Library. This university actually conducted what people believe is the first multi-state, multi-campus curated virtual reality class. And what they did was they brought 15 people together who were in separate locations in order to tour a cave with rare archaic cave art that is located on private land and is otherwise inaccessible to the public. Lastly, some possible future applications of virtual reality and augmented reality technology in libraries include storytelling. This could possibly be used in kids' story times in public libraries. Also, tours of libraries for those suffering from library anxiety or for those unable, maybe due to a physical disability, to get to the library to tour it. Also, information literacy instruction. There was a study I read about that showed, unfortunately, that information literacy instruction virtually was basically the same as receiving it from a real live librarian. And also, virtual travel experiences that you can go to the library to experience, such as visiting foreign cities, museums, national landmarks, libraries, art galleries, landmarks around the world that patrons otherwise wouldn't be able to visit. I hope you enjoyed my presentation and were able to learn something from it. Thanks for listening.